My name is Emma Carter. I was 29 years old when my family made the biggest mistake of their lives on Christmas Eve. The strange thing is, none of them realized it. Not when they laughed. Not when they mocked her. And certainly not when they destroyed the gifts she placed in front of them. But by the time the following year was over, every single one of them would wish they could go back and relive that night. Because the woman they underestimated wasn't just my grandmother. She was the smartest person any of us had ever known. And she had been quietly watching all of us for years. Before I tell you what happened, take a second to subscribe if you enjoy emotional family stories with shocking twists. And tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is where you are right now. I always enjoy reading your comments. Now let me take you back to the last Christmas my grandmother ever celebrated. My grandmother's name was Evelyn Carter. She lived alone in a small white house on a hill just outside our town. The house wasn't fancy. The furniture was old. The paint was fading in places. And the porch steps creaked whenever someone walked up them. But to me, it was the warmest place in the world. Every Saturday, without fail, I drove 40 minutes to visit her. Rain, snow, sunshine. It didn't matter. I always went. The funny thing was, nobody in my family understood why. My father used to say I was wasting my weekends. My brother thought it was boring. My sister only visited when she needed something. And my mother treated Grandma like an obligation she couldn't wait to avoid. But I loved those Saturdays. Grandma never rushed conversations. She actually listened. When I talked about my students, she listened. When I complained about bills, she listened. When I worried about the future, she listened. And somehow, every time I left her house, life felt a little easier. One Saturday in October, we were sitting in her garden trimming rosemary bushes before winter arrived. The air was cool. The leaves were turning orange. And the setting sun painted everything gold. Grandma suddenly put down her gardening shears. For a moment, she just stared across the yard. Then she sighed. Not a tired sigh. A heavy one. The kind that comes when someone has been carrying something alone for a long time. Emma, she said quietly. I looked up immediately. Something in her voice made my stomach tighten. What is it? She gave me a small smile. You've always been my easiest person to talk to. I laughed softly. That's because everyone else talks over you. Her smile grew wider. Then it disappeared. And suddenly she looked older than I had ever seen her. Evelyn. She reached over and took my hand. The moment her fingers touched mine, I knew something was wrong. Her hands were cold. Much colder than usual. I went to see a specialist last month. My heart immediately started racing. Why? She didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked down at our hands. Then she finally said the words. I have cancer. Everything inside me froze. The birds. The wind. The world itself. It all seemed to stop moving. I stared at her, waiting for her to say she was joking. Waiting for her to tell me it wasn't serious. Waiting for anything. But she didn't. It's advanced, she said gently. The tears hit me instantly. I wasn't prepared. I wasn't ready. Grandma had always been there. In my mind, she always would be. No, I whispered. She squeezed my hand. Sweetheart. No. She smiled sadly. I've had 82 wonderful years. I looked away because I couldn't bear to see how calm she was. She seemed more concerned about comforting me than herself. Then she surprised me. I need you to promise me something. I wiped my eyes. Anything. Don't tell the family. I blinked. What? Not yet. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Grandma, they deserve to know. She shook her head. No. But I want one last Christmas. Her voice was firm now. I don't want pity. I stayed silent. I don't want people suddenly pretending they care because they're afraid of losing me. That sentence hit harder than anything else she'd said. Because deep down, I knew exactly what she meant. My father hadn't called her in weeks. My brother only visited when he needed money. My sister treated every family gathering like social media content. And my mother spent more time criticizing Grandma than talking to her. Evelyn looked directly into my eyes. I want one final Christmas where people show me who they really are. A chill ran through me. At the time, I didn't fully understand what she meant. But I would soon. Very soon. Because on Christmas Eve, my grandmother was planning something. Something none of us saw coming. And before the night was over, 5 envelopes would be placed on the dinner table. 4 would be destroyed. 1 would be kept. And that single decision would change everything. Christmas Eve arrived with heavy snow falling from a dark gray sky. By the time I pulled into my grandmother's driveway, The house looked like something from a holiday postcard. Warm yellow lights glowed through the windows. Smoke drifted from the chimney. And for a moment, sitting in my car, I forgot everything she had told me in the garden. I forgot about the cancer. I forgot about the promise. I forgot that this might be our last Christmas together. I just sat there looking at the house I had visited every Saturday for nearly 10 years. Then I grabbed the apple pie I had baked and headed inside. The smell hit me immediately. Roasted turkey, fresh bread, cinnamon, and the familiar scent of wood burning in the fireplace. Grandma was standing in the kitchen wearing her favorite yellow sweater. The same sweater she wore almost every winter. The moment she saw me, her face lit up. "There's my girl." She hugged me tightly, maybe tighter than usual. And for a brief second, I felt her hold on just a little longer before letting go. "You look tired," I said. She smiled. "I'm 82. Looking tired is part of the package." I laughed, but inside my heart hurt, because now I knew the truth, and every little sign felt bigger than before. The rest of the family arrived over the next hour. My father came first, Richard Carter, a man who believed every room belonged to him the moment he entered it. He stomped snow off his boots and immediately started inspecting the house. Not admiring it, inspecting it, like he was already deciding what he would do with it someday. My mother arrived right behind him. "Mom, you really should replace these curtains." That was the first thing she said. Not hello, not Merry Christmas, not how are you. Curtains. Grandma simply smiled. "I like them." My mother rolled her eyes. Of course she did. Then my older brother Jason arrived. 34 years old. Always chasing some business idea. Always borrowing money. Never paying it back. He barely hugged Grandma before helping himself to the food. My younger sister Madison showed up last. Phone already recording. "Christmas with the family," she announced to her followers. She spun in a circle filming the living room. The tree. The decorations. The fireplace. Everything except the woman who had spent 3 days preparing the meal. I watched Grandma's face carefully. She wasn't angry. She wasn't disappointed. She just observed. Quietly. Like someone collecting information. And suddenly I remembered her words. "I want one final Christmas where people show me who they really are." Dinner started peacefully enough. Everyone laughed. Talked. Ate. But after an hour, the real reason everyone had come began showing itself. Jason complained about money. Again. Madison talked about wanting a bigger house. Again. My mother mentioned retirement. Again. And my father spent 20 minutes talking about how expensive everything had become. Again. Nobody asked Grandma how she was doing. Nobody asked about her health. Nobody asked if she needed anything. The entire conversation revolved around themselves. I noticed Grandma barely speaking. Instead, she simply listened, watching each person carefully, almost like she was waiting. Then something strange happened. Her best friend, Mrs. Margaret Benson, stopped by unexpectedly. The two women had known each other for over 40 years. Margaret handed Grandma a small jar of honey and hugged her tightly. A little too tightly. When they pulled apart, I noticed both women had tears in their eyes. Grandma quickly wiped hers away before anyone noticed. Everyone except me. I noticed. And I had a feeling Margaret knew the truth about Grandma's illness. Before leaving, Margaret pulled me aside. "Take care of her." I nodded. "I will." She squeezed my shoulder. Then she whispered something I'll never forget. "She knows exactly what she's doing tonight." A chill ran through me. "What does that mean?" Margaret smiled sadly. "You'll find out." Then she left. An hour later, dinner was over. The dishes were cleared. The fireplace crackled softly. Snow continued falling outside. And Grandma slowly stood up from her chair. The room fell silent. For some reason, every hair on my arms stood up. Grandma walked toward a small wooden box sitting beside the fireplace. I had noticed it earlier, but I hadn't thought much about it. Now she picked it up carefully and carried it to the dining table. Everyone watched. Curious. She placed the box in front of her, then opened it. Inside were 5 identical cream-colored envelopes, one for each member of the family. Jason frowned. Madison lowered her phone. My father leaned forward, and for the first time all evening, every single person was paying complete attention to Grandma. A small smile appeared on her face. Then she began handing out the envelopes one by one. My father received his first. My mother second. Jason third. Madison fourth. Mine was last. When she placed it in front of me, Her hand rested briefly on my shoulder. Just for a second. Then she returned to her seat. The room became completely silent. No one moved. No one spoke. 5 envelopes sat on the table, waiting to be opened. And none of us knew that within the next few minutes, those envelopes would reveal exactly who we were. The room was completely silent. 5 envelopes sat on the dining table. The fire crackled softly in the background. Snow tapped against the windows. And for the first time all evening, every member of my family was paying attention to Grandma. I glanced at her. She looked calm. Almost too calm. Like she already knew exactly what was about to happen. My father was the first to move. That wasn't surprising. Richard Carter always believed he should go first. In everything. He opened his envelope without hesitation. My mother leaned closer. Jason stopped eating. Madison lowered her phone. My father pulled out a single sheet of paper. At first he frowned. Then his expression changed completely. Confusion. Disbelief. Annoyance. "What is this?" he asked. Nobody answered. He looked down again. Then suddenly laughed. Not a happy laugh. A mocking one. A joke. Jason immediately grabbed his own envelope. "What?" My mother opened hers. Madison followed. Within seconds, all 4 of them were staring at identical documents. Checks. Each check was made out for exactly $5 million. $5 million. The number looked ridiculous. Impossible. The kind of number people only saw in movies. For a moment nobody spoke. Then Jason burst out laughing. A loud, ugly laugh. "Oh my God!" He slapped the table. "Grandma, this is actually funny." Madison grabbed her phone. "Wait." She started recording. "You guys have to see this." My stomach tightened. I looked toward Grandma. She wasn't laughing. Not even a little. My father held up his check. "This isn't real." His voice was sharp. Dismissive. "It's obviously fake." My mother nodded immediately. "Mom, honestly, this isn't funny." Grandma simply folded her hands in her lap. She didn't defend herself. She didn't explain. She just watched. Jason shook his head. $5 million? He laughed again. "You almost got me." Almost. The word hit me hard. Because nobody had even stopped to ask if it might be real. Not one person. Not a single question. Not a single conversation. They had already decided. Madison stood up. Still filming. "Guys, look." She held the check toward her camera. "Grandma just made us all millionaires." Her followers couldn't see the amount clearly. But she thought it was hilarious. Then she walked toward the fireplace. I felt my chest tighten. "What are you doing?" I asked. She grinned. Improving the joke. Before anyone could stop her, she dropped the check into the flames. The paper caught almost instantly. The corner curled black. The fire consumed it within seconds. Madison laughed. Jason laughed too. My mother shook her head. Grandma never moved. Never spoke. Never reacted. And somehow that scared me more than if she had yelled. Jason looked at his own check. Then crumpled it into a ball. "There." He tossed it under the table. Problem solved. My mother slowly tore hers in half. Then again. And again. Small pieces fell onto her plate beside the mashed potatoes. "Honestly, Mom." She sighed. "You're too old for these games." The words hung in the air. Too old. Games. I looked at Grandma. For just a second, I thought I saw pain in her eyes. Not because of the checks. Because of the people. Because these were her children. Her family. And they couldn't even give her the respect of asking a simple question. Then my father made the biggest mistake of all. He dropped his check onto his dinner plate. Gravy soaked into the paper. The signature disappeared beneath the stain. And he looked directly at Grandma. "If you wanted attention, you could have just said so." The room went silent. Even Madison stopped recording. I couldn't believe what I had just heard. Grandma had spent days cooking for everyone. Decorating. Preparing gifts. Opening her home. And that was what she got in return. I looked down at my own envelope. For the first time, I pulled out the check. $5 million. The paper felt heavy. Official. Professional. It didn't look fake. Not at all. In fact, it looked incredibly real. I examined the security marks. The watermark. The bank information. Everything looked legitimate. A strange feeling settled into my stomach. I remembered something Grandma had said weeks earlier. The family is going to learn something important very soon. Then I remembered the way Margaret had looked at me before dinner. She knows exactly what she's doing tonight. Suddenly I wasn't so sure this was a joke. Not anymore. The room waited. Everyone watching me now. My father smirked. Jason folded his arms. Madison pointed her phone at me. Come on, Emma. She laughed. Don't tell me you actually believe it's real. I looked down at the check. Then at Grandma. She met my eyes. And in that moment I understood something. She wasn't testing the checks. She was testing us. The checks were never the point. The reaction was. Slowly, I folded mine in half. Then again. And slipped it carefully into my purse. The room exploded. Oh my God! Jason laughed so hard he nearly fell out of his chair. Madison pointed her camera at me. Guys, my sister actually believes it. My father shook his head. You're an idiot. My mother sighed. Emma, you're 29 years old. I ignored all of them. I looked at Grandma and quietly said 4 simple words. Thank you, Grandma. For the first time all evening, her eyes softened. She smiled. Just once. A small smile. But it was enough. Because somehow deep inside, I knew something none of the others did. Grandma wasn't finished yet. And before this was over, every person sitting at that table was going to regret what they had done. I barely slept that night. The check stayed on my kitchen table long after midnight. Every time I walked past it, I found myself looking at it again. $5 million. The number seemed ridiculous. Impossible. The kind of thing that only happened to other people. Not to a third-grade teacher living in a rented apartment with an aging Subaru that made strange noises every winter. By 1 a.m, I had convinced myself it had to be fake. By 3, I wasn't so sure. And by 6, I was already dressed and heading toward the bank. Not because I planned to cash it. I just wanted answers. The town was quiet the morning after Christmas. Fresh snow covered everything. The streets were nearly empty. As I drove, I kept replaying the previous night in my head. My father's laughter. Jason's jokes. Madison throwing her check into the fire. The look on Grandma's face. She hadn't looked embarrassed. She hadn't looked confused. She had looked certain. Like she knew exactly what would happen. That thought stayed with me all the way to First National Bank. The bank manager, Benjamin Foster, had known me since I was 16 years old. He was one of those people who remembered everyone's name. When I walked through the doors, he greeted me with his usual smile. Emma Carter. Merry Christmas, Mr. Foster. Merry Christmas. Then I pulled the folded check from my purse. His smile disappeared. Not completely. Just enough for me to notice. I was hoping you could verify something for me. I placed the check on his desk. The moment he looked down, his expression changed. The color drained from his face. For several seconds, he didn't say a word. He simply stared. Then he looked at me. Then back at the check. Then at me again. The silence suddenly felt heavy. Very heavy. Mr. Foster? He cleared his throat. Emma. His voice sounded different. More serious. Could you come with me for a moment? My stomach dropped. He picked up the check carefully. Almost respectfully. Then led me through a hallway behind the teller stations. Past several offices. Past a security door. Until we reached a small private conference room. No windows. 1 table. 4 chairs. The kind of room where important conversations happened. Benjamin closed the door behind us. Then locked it. My pulse immediately sped up. Is something wrong? He slowly sat down. No. Then why are we in here? He looked at the check again. Took a deep breath. Then folded his hands together. Emma, have you read the note written on the back? I frowned. Note. He turned the check over. There, in Grandma's familiar handwriting, were 8 words I hadn't noticed the night before. For the one who never stopped showing up. My throat tightened. I recognized every curve of her handwriting instantly. Benjamin watched me carefully. Your grandmother wrote that herself. I swallowed. Is the check real? The room became silent. Then he answered. Yes. 1 word. Just 1. But it felt like a thunderbolt. I stared at him, unable to process what I had heard. What? The check is real. My heart started pounding. No. Benjamin nodded. It is. $5 million? Yes. I laughed nervously. Because surely there had to be some mistake. There had to be. My grandmother doesn't have $5 million. Benjamin didn't respond. That terrified me. Because he wasn't correcting me. After several long seconds, he opened a folder sitting beside him. Inside were official documents. Bank records. Signatures. Forms. Everything looked incredibly professional. Then he said something that completely shattered my understanding of who my grandmother really was. Your grandmother came here in November. I blinked. What? She personally authorized 5 separate checks. 5 checks. One for each family member. Exactly as she had handed them out. Benjamin continued. Each one was fully funded. The room felt smaller. My breathing became shallow. She really had $25 million? Benjamin looked at me carefully, then slowly shook his head. No. My confusion deepened. No. He leaned back in his chair. And for the first time since I arrived, I saw genuine sympathy in his eyes. Emma. He paused, as if choosing his next words very carefully. Then he said, your grandmother didn't have $25 million. My heartbeat echoed in my ears. Then how? Benjamin interrupted me. And the next sentence changed everything. Your grandmother's total assets are worth considerably more than that. I froze. Completely. The room went silent. Because in that moment I realized something impossible. My grandmother wasn't secretly wealthy. She was far richer than anyone in our family had ever imagined. And somehow, I had a feeling the $5 million check was only the beginning. I sat frozen in the conference room. Benjamin Foster's words kept echoing in my head. Your grandmother's total assets are worth considerably more than that. I stared at him, unable to speak, unable to think. For 29 years, I had known my grandmother as a retired schoolteacher who lived alone in an old house on a hill. She clipped coupons. She repaired old sweaters instead of buying new ones. She drove the same car for almost 15 years. Nothing about her life suggested enormous wealth. Yet here I was, sitting in a locked conference room, being told that the woman everyone in my family underestimated was worth far more than $25 million. It didn't seem possible. How much? I finally asked. Benjamin hesitated. I shouldn't discuss exact details. My stomach tightened. But, he looked at me carefully. Let's just say your grandmother spent decades making very smart decisions. Decades. The word hit me harder than the number. Because suddenly I understood something. This wasn't luck. This wasn't a lottery ticket. This wasn't an accident. Grandma had built whatever fortune she had over an entire lifetime. Quietly. Without telling anyone. Without bragging. Without demanding recognition. And somehow nobody had noticed. Benjamin slid the check back across the table. There's something else. I looked up. What? A lawyer will be contacting you soon. A lawyer? He nodded. Your grandmother made several arrangements before Christmas. The room suddenly felt colder. What kind of arrangements? I'm not authorized to discuss that. His answer told me everything. Whatever Grandma had planned was much bigger than 5 checks. Much bigger. I left the bank in a daze. The check was now safely deposited. $5 million. The number still didn't feel real. As I stepped outside, snowflakes drifted through the air. People hurried along the sidewalks carrying shopping bags and coffee cups. The world looked exactly the same. But mine had completely changed. My phone vibrated. Then again. Then again. And again. I looked down. 6 missed calls. 3 text messages. All from family. My heart sank. Somehow they already knew. The first message came from my sister Madison. Emma, call me ASAP. The second arrived 10 seconds later. I made a mistake. Then another. I shouldn't have burned it. I stared at the screen. Less than 24 hours earlier, she had been laughing while the check turned to ash. Now she wanted it back. My brother Jason was even worse. His voicemail arrived next. Emma, listen. Grandma was obviously serious. Tell me where she got those checks. I deleted the message. Then another arrived. Call me back. Delete. Then another. Emma, this isn't funny. Delete. By the time I reached my car, my father had already called 4 times. 4. The man who sometimes forgot my birthday had suddenly become very interested in speaking with me. I knew exactly why. And for the first time in my life, I didn't answer. Instead, I drove directly to Grandma's house. The familiar hill appeared ahead. The white house stood quietly beneath a blanket of snow. For some reason, seeing it made me emotional. Because now I realized something. This house had been holding secrets for decades. And none of us had ever bothered to ask. Grandma opened the door before I even knocked. As if she had been expecting me. Which honestly she probably had. Good morning, sweetheart. I stepped inside. The warmth wrapped around me instantly. She pointed toward the kitchen. Coffee. I nodded. We sat at the same table where we had shared hundreds of conversations over the years. For a few moments neither of us spoke. Then I looked directly at her. The check was real. Grandma smiled. I know. I laughed. Not because it was funny. Because I didn't know what else to do. You knew they would destroy them. Her smile widened. Yes. You knew they'd laugh. Yes. You knew they'd call you crazy. Probably. I shook my head. Why? For a long moment she simply stared out the window, watching snow fall into the garden. Then she answered. Because I wanted to know whether anyone would trust me. The room became quiet. Very quiet. She took a slow sip of coffee. I didn't give those checks away to test intelligence. She looked directly at me. I gave them away to test character. A chill ran down my spine. Because suddenly everything made sense. The checks were never about money. Not really. They were about respect. Trust. Gratitude. The ability to receive something without immediately judging it. Then Grandma surprised me again. Do you know what hurt the most? I shook my head. Her eyes softened. Not one of them asked me a single question. I swallowed hard. She continued quietly. Not one person said, Grandma, where did this come from? She smiled sadly. Not one. The pain in her voice broke my heart. Because she wasn't talking about the checks anymore. She was talking about years. Years of being ignored. Years of being underestimated. Years of being seen as nothing more than an old woman waiting to die. Just then my phone buzzed again. Then again. Then again. I looked down. 12 new messages. All from family. Grandma glanced at the screen. Then calmly buttered a piece of toast. They know now. I nodded. Yeah. She smiled. A knowing smile. The kind she always wore when she was 3 steps ahead of everyone else. Then she said something that made my blood run cold. The money isn't what they're going to fight over, Emma. I frowned. What do you mean? Grandma looked directly into my eyes. And for the first time that morning, her expression turned serious. Because they still don't know what's coming next. For the next 2 days, my phone never stopped ringing. Calls, texts, voicemails, emails, even social media messages. Every member of my family suddenly remembered I existed. It was amazing how quickly people can rediscover love when money enters the conversation. I ignored most of it. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I needed time to think. Everything had happened so fast. The check, the bank, the secret fortune, the lawyer, and now Grandma's warning. They still don't know what's coming next. Those words stayed in my head. Because if $5 million wasn't the main event, what was? The answer arrived sooner than I expected. 3 days after Christmas, someone started pounding on my apartment door. Not knocking. Pounding. I looked through the peephole. My father. Behind him stood my mother. Jason. Madison. The entire family. I closed my eyes. For a moment, I considered pretending I wasn't home. Then I remembered something Grandma once told me. You can't avoid difficult people forever. Sometimes you have to let them show you exactly who they are. So I opened the door. The moment I did, my father pushed past me. No greeting. No apology. Nothing. He walked straight into my living room like he owned it. The others followed. My mother sat on the couch. Jason folded his arms. Madison immediately started recording voice notes on her phone. I suddenly felt like a stranger in my own home. My father got straight to the point. How much did she give you? I stared at him. No hello. No Merry Christmas. No how are you. Just money. 5 million. The room fell silent. Even though they already knew. Hearing it out loud made it real. Jason cursed under his breath. Madison looked like she might cry. My mother looked sick. Then my father spoke again. That money belongs to the family. I almost laughed. Almost. Instead, I asked a simple question. Which family? The room froze. His jaw tightened. Don't start. No, seriously. I looked around the room. Which family? Nobody answered. Because we all knew the truth. The family that ignored Grandma? The family that rarely visited? The family that laughed at her gift? Which family exactly deserved her money? Jason stepped forward. Emma, that's not fair. Isn't it? His face turned red. None of us knew. I stared at him. You didn't ask. What? You didn't ask. I repeated it slowly. You never asked where the money came from. Nobody spoke. Because they knew I was right. Madison suddenly burst into tears. I made a mistake. The room turned toward her. I thought it was fake. Her mascara had already started running. I wouldn't have burned it if I'd known. There it was. The truth. Not regret. Not guilt. Not sadness. Just loss. She wasn't sorry for disrespecting Grandma. She was sorry she lost $5 million. And everyone in the room knew it. My mother tried a different approach. The emotional approach. Emma, sweetheart. Whenever she used that voice, trouble followed. We all make mistakes. I stayed silent. She continued. Families forgive each other. My father nodded immediately. Exactly. I almost couldn't believe what I was hearing. 3 days ago, they were calling Grandma crazy. Now they were giving speeches about family. Then my father leaned forward and said something that changed everything. We're going to talk to a lawyer. The room went quiet. My stomach tightened. What? You heard me. His voice was cold. Mom wasn't thinking clearly. I stared at him. For several seconds, I genuinely couldn't speak. Because he wasn't just insulting Grandma anymore. He was trying to erase her choices. She knew exactly what she was doing. No. Yes. No. His voice became louder. She was old. The words hit me like a slap. Because I knew the truth. Grandma had anticipated this. Every bit of it. The greed. The excuses. The legal threats. Everything. Then my phone buzzed. A new email. The sender's name immediately caught my attention. Harold Whitmore, attorney at law. Grandma's lawyer. The room suddenly felt smaller. I opened the message. One sentence. One sentence that changed the expression on my face instantly. My father noticed. What is it? I looked up slowly. For the first time since they arrived, I smiled. Not because I was happy, because I finally understood what Grandma meant. They still didn't know what was coming next. And neither did I. But whatever it was big. Very big. I looked directly at my family. Then back at the email. The attorney wanted everyone present at his office on January 15th. For the official reading of Evelyn Carter's estate. And according to the final line of the email, the $5 million checks were only a small portion of what Grandma had left behind. January 15th arrived colder than any day I could remember. The sky was gray. The roads were covered in ice. And as I drove toward Harold Whitmore's law office, I couldn't stop thinking about Grandma. For weeks, everyone in my family had been obsessed with money. Not grief. Not memories. Not loss. Money. $5 million had turned them into strangers. And somehow deep down, I knew the real shock was still waiting. The conference room was already full when I arrived. My father sat at the head of the table. My mother sat beside him. Jason leaned back with his arms crossed. Madison was staring at her phone. Nobody smiled when I walked in. Nobody said hello. They were all waiting for the same thing. The inheritance. Harold Whitmore entered exactly at 10 o'clock. Tall. Calm. Professional. He carried a thick green folder. The room immediately fell silent. Harold adjusted his glasses and opened the file. This is the last will and testament of Evelyn Rose Carter. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. He began reading. Several personal items were left to friends. Grandma's favorite piano was donated to a local school. Her collection of books went to the town library. Her antique jewelry was divided among charities. Each item had been carefully planned. Carefully chosen. Just like everything Grandma ever did. Then Harold turned a page. And the atmosphere in the room changed. The remaining estate. Everyone sat up straighter. My father's eyes locked onto the lawyer. Jason leaned forward. Madison finally put her phone away. Harold continued reading. The family residence. The surrounding land. Investment accounts. Trust funds. Business interests. Private holdings. My stomach tightened. Even Harold seemed impressed by the size of the list. Then he looked up. The estimated value of the remaining estate is approximately $42 million. The room exploded. What? Jason practically jumped from his chair. Madison's mouth fell open. My mother covered her face. My father looked completely frozen. $42 million. On top of the checks. Grandma had been worth more than any of us had imagined. Far more. Then Harold continued. And everything changed. The entirety of the remaining estate is left to my granddaughter, Emma Carter. Silence. Absolute silence. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Even the clock on the wall seemed louder. Tick, tick, tick. My father slowly stood up. His face had turned pale. What? Harold calmly adjusted his glasses. The entire estate. No. My father's voice cracked. No. Jason looked at me as if I'd somehow stolen it. Madison looked ready to faint. My mother began crying. But Harold wasn't finished. Not even close. Attached to the will was a handwritten letter from Grandma. Harold unfolded it carefully, then began reading aloud. To my family. The room became perfectly still. If you are hearing this letter, I am gone. My chest tightened. Hearing her words again felt like losing her all over. Harold continued. Money was never the test. Every person at the table froze. The checks I gave on Christmas Eve were not gifts. They were opportunities. Jason looked down. Madison's eyes filled with tears. An opportunity to trust me. An opportunity to ask questions. An opportunity to show gratitude. Harold paused before reading the next line. Only one person accepted that opportunity. I felt tears forming in my eyes. Harold looked directly at the page. Emma visited me every Saturday. Not because she expected anything. Not because she wanted money. Not because she wanted an inheritance. She came because she loved me. Nobody spoke. Nobody could. Because everyone knew it was true. Then came the final sentence. The sentence that would stay with me forever. I am not leaving my fortune to the person who needed money most. I am leaving it to the person who valued me most. The room fell silent. Again, my father sat down heavily. For the first time in my life, he looked defeated. Not angry. Not proud. Defeated. Because there was nothing left to argue. No loophole. No misunderstanding. No mistake. Grandma had made her choice. And she had made it with complete clarity. After the meeting ended, nobody spoke to me. Not my father. Not my mother. Not Jason. Not Madison. One by one, they left. The conference room slowly emptied. Until only Harold and I remained. He closed the folder and smiled. Your grandmother was remarkable. I nodded. She was. Then he handed me one final envelope. She wanted you to have this after the reading. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a short handwritten note. Just one sentence. Written in Grandma's familiar handwriting. Thank you for showing up on Saturdays. I cried before I even finished reading it. If you've made it this far, take a moment to subscribe and tell me in the comments. Have you ever had someone in your life who loved you without expecting anything in return? I'd love to hear your story. Because sometimes the greatest inheritance isn't money. It's knowing that someone truly saw your heart. And in the end, that was the gift my grandmother left me. Red Heart.